Good morning, Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're on page 1348. So the Rebbe Rashab is concluding a long 452-page parentheses explaining the Torah of the Magid, but it's all following his long explanation, essentially, briefly, the transformation of the Tzimtzum, of the Parsa, of the concealments and the partitions that allow existence to be created. But now, after creation, we need to now create a union or a reunion of existence and the divine. So in order to create, God created Tzimtzumim in order to conceal his presence, because his divine omnipotence and omnipresence would not allow room for any independent consciousness. But once there's an independent consciousness, that's not the goal in its own, it's to make a dira b'tachtein. So just like it is in education, first the teacher needs to conceal so the student can develop on his own and expand his containers. And as he does, that expansion allows the revelation to come in greater and greater till the student can reach the level of the teacher. Like at 40 years, it says, the student can achieve the same level as the teacher and even surpass him in a way, in many ways. The same thing in any education of children. First, we bend down and we lean down to children on their level as we feed them and we nourish them and nurture them. But as children grow, they become independent because they need to have their independence. And as they grow, they can then grow and become greater and greater. So basically, concealment always will precede revelation. Simply, that's the process of existence. That's why that's what creates the hierarchy. That's what creates the structure. That's what creates the distinction and diversity of everything in existence. If everything was consumed by the oneness of God, then you wouldn't have a world like ours at all. So basically, that's the process that he's describing, that the Rebbe, in the Magid's words, that onon, the eish mislakachas, that first comes an onon, which is a concealer, the darkness of the cloud, like the tzimtzum, the parsa, the nekudas harashimu, everything is concealed. And then at that stage in Avodah, the person is not yet ready to have a fiery passion in davening, because we're talking about neshamas that have come down to this world, as he explained afterwards, neshamas of Biy'a. These are neshamas that are already so-called detached, at least on a conscious level, from their source, and they're engaged with, like he called nitfas begeshem, these souls of Biy'a. They're contained, they're bound by gashmias. So their initial state is a state of darkness and distance, but then they will develop through Avodah. That's the Avodas HaBirurim. The Birurim is what? Is to separate, to clarify, and to refine this darkened state until you turn yourself and your world around you, the part of the world around you, into containers for Elikus, for godliness. So it leads to the revelation. And that itself, he spoke about the levels of revelation. At first, the Kalim of Biy'a become Kalim for the Oir, and the Oir in turn and the Kalim of Atzilus become Kalim to higher levels of Oir, and the Oir itself reaches out to the highest levels of Etzem Oir. As he spoke the three levels of Ratzeh V'Shuv in Biy'a, Kalim of Atzilus, and Oiris. Okay, so that's in the Neshamas Biy'a. So their work, as he said, is generally Malmata Lamaila, from the bottom up, progressively, as they refine themselves and their containers, becoming receptacles and channels for godly energy, for the transcendent energy, from the bottom up. On the other hand, the neshamas of Atzilus is the opposite. The neshamas of Atzilus, they're not nitfasim again. They're not bound by gashmis. So their avodah is mamayla lamata, where they draw down the divine energy into existence and to refine the darkness to the point that the darkness is transformed, but this time light is doing it, not from the bottom up. That's where we stopped. In these type of souls, the Aveda is Gilead Air. So that's the contrast to what the Magid is talking about, the neshamas of Biy'a, where there they go from the bottom up. Starts with chashchus, the mekedim hachashchus she'er ba'adam she'eni yachal yispal. First, there's a darkened state and a concealed state, and then we come to revelation. But now he's talking about the neshamas of Atzilus, which goes from the top down. There, like we spoke earlier, the neshama is like connected to Shema. So even though we learned that the neshamas of Atzilus on Tzadikim also have tshuva, because they also engage with the yesh, but even when they do tshuva, it's all through it's not through darkness. It's just that the deeper you go into the the more they sense their inadequacy, so therefore there's a tshuva. That's when Mashiach will bring them to the level of tshuva, but that's a different type of tshuva than it is by a Baal tshuva that comes strictly from the dark state, from the bottom up. So we stop before the parentheses, and that's where I'm going to continue now. On page 1348, the line that begins Yeh B'chinas Eir. So there's a parentheses at the end of the line, and these pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. So he says like this: after saying B'neshamas Elu, and these neshamas of Atzilus, Chilas Aveda, their beginning of Aveda is not in darkness. It is B'chinas Gilui Eir. It's in a state of revelation, because that's where they come. They come from that type of so-called, I don't want to say privileged, but they are enlightened souls who begin with light, and then they work their way down into the darkness. So now the Rebbe Rashab is going to qualify that. He says, V'yesh, there's also a scenario, there's also a situation, there's also a Shagam Neshamas Atzilus, that also Neshamas of Atzilus that we're talking about that are coming like souls of light, so to speak, that begin with light. He says also these Neshamas of Atzilus, Boyim Beguf Chumri, so there's a scenario where these Neshamas of Atzilus come into a Guf Chumri, into a crass body. In other words, as refined as these souls are, but they are descending into a body that's called Chumri, which is more than Gashmi. Geshem is physical. Chumri is crass or coarse, more materialistic, so to speak. Hamaylim umastir, that conceals and covers up on their neshama. Now, of course, it doesn't cover up completely, or else they wouldn't be neshamas of Atzilus, but it does, though there is some concealment as a result of it. So it descends into that state, but it's not bound by it. So in other words, a neshama l'mayla above in Gan Eden is not even coming down into a guf, let alone a chumrizdika guf, a crass body. Because there, the neshama is independent and separate from anything physical. Here we're talking about the other end, the neshamas of Biy'a, they come down and are nitfis, and they're bound by the physical bodies. Like you can look at each one of us. As much as we have a chelik elokam emal mamish, a soul that's a piece of God, so to speak, as the Alter Rebbe explains, and the neshama shenasata bi tahirihi, as we say every morning, that the soul you've given me, instilled in me, is pure. So we also have that pure soul, but the soul comes into a body, and it's an animal soul that we are bound by. We're hungry in the morning, we have pain, we experience this world in a very powerful way, and not only that, many ways, the tug of materialism is more powerful than the tug of the spiritual. So even though the neshama is intact, but what controls our lives is our body and our animal soul, like he explains later in Tanya, that by a Beinani, and definitely by a Rosh V'Tovle, what controls the person is the animal instincts, are the main control. However, there's a neshama at work, and then we have a battle, and we sometimes win that battle. By a Beinani, he always wins the battle, but he never eliminates his animal soul. Even a Beinani is nitfis, because he's struggling all the time. He just has that discipline and self-control of moyach shal talalev, his mind controlling his emotions and his impulses, so he controls his thought, speech, and action. But he's definitely bound. And now we're talking about neshama d'Atzilus that's not bound, but he's saying there are neshamas d'Atzilus that do come into a guf chumri, which does conceal, but these neshamas of Atzilus, their neshamas are not bound by the chumrius, by chumrius haguf, by the crassness of the body. So it's there, but it's not bound by it. V'hainu, what does that mean in practical terms? She'einu nimsheches chas v'shalom, that soul, those souls are not drawn, God forbid, achar hachumrius v'hester haguf. They're not drawn to follow the crassness of the body and the covering of the crassness and the covering of the body. So in other words, even though the body itself on its own may desire something, their neshamas are powerful enough not to be drawn to it. Neshamas of Biy'a, And especially as you go down lower neshamas, are bound and are drawn to it. And again, we don't need any proof. Just look at ourselves. However, these neshamas do enter into the physical and chumizdika world and guf, but they're not drawn to it. They're not drawn and bound by it. I didn't read it correctly. I should say, that's how they're not drawn or not follow after the chumris, the crassness. So then what's the point of the Hester Aguf? So I'm just reading it differently because the Hester Aguf goes to this and the next phrase. He says, the Hester Aguf, Hurak kamoy levush. It's only like a garment. Ukamoy dover zeh, dover zor hamastir. Like a strange alien object that's concealing. Let me explain. When the soul comes into our body, there's a few parts. There's the body as the skeleton, the physical body, which the skeleton is very much part of who the body is. But when you put on a garment, like a jacket on top of your skeleton, on top of your body, the garment definitely conceals, but it's not part of who you are. It's an outside force. So what he's saying is like this, that the guf for these neshamas of Atzilus is not like a guf, like a skeleton to a body, but it's like a garment that's an outside thing that the neshama, so to speak, enters into an alien zone, if you wish. By neshamas of Biy'a, the neshama itself manifests not just like in a garment, but it's bound by it. So it's as if like an actual, it's the body to the soul. For the neshamas of Atzilus, the body is like a garment, like he says, a dover hazor, dover zor. So it's another thing. It's not part of who they are, is that God wants to send. It's like sending on shlichus somebody who's a very pure soul, and you send them to a place that's not a very pure place. So they're never really bound by the place. They're there, but they live there like a foreigner. Or you could say that place is like foreign to them. It says, Rabbeinu Bachai says that all tzaddikim in this world are called a ger. A ger. What's a ger? A ger we call a convert, but a ger really means a stranger. That's what a ger is, a stranger in this land. Because their neshamas, in their relationship with this world, always feel strange. We become very comfortable in this world. This world becomes our place that we feel this is beginning and end of everything. Just look how people's relationship with physicality is, or the relationship with money. They become like you can't live without it. For a tzaddik, let's say a neshamas of Atzilus, I should say, it's not that way at all. They come into this world, but they're like passing through. You know, the famous story with the Maggid really captures this very well. So the Maggid of Mizrich, talk about the Maggid, since this is Torah, maybe it's fitting. So he lived very, as you can imagine, very sparsely and very limited, and did not live in any, he lived like a pauper. One day in Mizrich arrives a wealthy Yid who heard about the Maggid and was very inspired by him and through his students. So he wanted to meet the great Maggid. So after davening, he asked, where's the Maggid? Where can he find the Maggid? They said, there's a little shack at the end of, they pointed where he lived. And he went, he knocked on the door. And he comes in and he sees literally a shack, one room, with a bed on the side, a little kitchen, all in the same room. And the Maggid is sitting and learning. I mean, like living as complete poverty. So he was so shocked and so surprised. He says to the Maggid, are you the Maggid? The Maggid, I don't know how he identified him, but he called him. So, I mean, I'm sure the Maggid didn't say, yes, I'm the Maggid. He probably answered in a humble way. But upon him, he says, I'm so surprised. I mean, you have Talmidim, you have followers, you have disciples. Can give you a house that doesn't have to be a wealthy mansion, but something that's more fitting to where you are. So the Maggid looked at him and said to him, and who are you? You know, so he said, I'm a person, I live in the city. And what kind of house do you live in? He says, listen, I do business. And thank God, God blessed me. So I have a nice home with many rooms, comfortable, and so on. He says, where do you do business? He says, I travel to Leipzig, was the famous marketplace, travels a few times a year, buys in the market what he needs to buy, comes back, and then him and his family, they sell it to the local merchants, and they make their profit. He says, when you travel there, where do you stay? He says, I stay in a little inn, in a room. Well, how many rooms? He said, 1 room or 2 rooms max. Those days probably was 1 room. So he said, if someone came into you there and said to you, you're a wealthy man, why are you just living in this small little room here? What would you answer? He says, Magid, listen, I guess you don't understand because I'm on the road. I would tell the person that Haim is God Anders. Come to my home and it's completely different. There you'll see how I live. Here I'm on the road. So on the road, I'm just traveling through. It's not my place. I don't belong here. So I have one little room to live in. So the Maggid smiled and said to him, the same is with me. We are here in this material world. We're only passing through. This is a short stay, and this is not our permanent place. You want to come to my home, in the Haim is God Anders, and my home is also very different. Basically, my spiritual home. Ruchnius, Alakus, godliness. So that's the difference. Very 2 different ways of looking of how you adapt to the material world. So these neshamas he's saying, it always is a lavush, zar hamastir. It's like a strange thing that they're dressed in it because that's what Hashem wants them to come into this world. And even a guf chumri. He didn't say all neshamas of Atzilus come into this state. Some are very refined, I guess, refined states. We'll see if he qualifies it. But there are some that come into this state, but the levush hamastir, the guf hamastir, the hester aguf, is only like a garment, which is not them. It's like they're dressing up in a garment. It's just like when we talk about the classic stories where the melech dresses up like a peasant to come and be among the people. So we dress into the garments. I speak about Esav, Yaakov dressing in the garments of Esav, that we dress in the physical garments because we need to speak the language of the material world. But don't ever think that your garment is you. Like I always say, when you ask somebody, who are you? And they give you their business card tells me what you do, not who you are. Don't allow what you do become who you are. Who you are should define what you do. So what we do and what we're active involved is the garment. And these neshamas are aware of that. So then, in this case, with these neshamas, so what is their avodah? So he says their avodah is to remove this garment. In other words, even the garment should also not block anything, because at the end of the day, they are involved. Like, when the Alter Rebbe told that chassid that he should become a balagala, basically a chauffeur, an Uber driver. In those days, a balagala was someone who was a wagon driver. Now, he was a person who was a tremendous Talmud Chacham scholar, a pious, could have sat and davened and learned and be a teacher. But that was our shlichus. The shlichus, he has to dress in the garment of a wagon driver. Like we said, the neshama, even these neshamas of Atzilus who are not bound by it, but they still have to go there. And when you go down, there is going to be a concealment, whether you like it or not, because you're involved. You have to be involved with the material matters of this world. They're just not bound by it. So their avodah is to remove even this so-called concealing garment. That's their avodah. Also mulmayla lamata, but they are engaging. They're not bound by it, but they're engaging with the crassness of the world. So he says, "V'asara sehester." How do you remove the concealment then? Hu al yedei his gabrus yiseda b'derech mesiras nefesh be'eze inyan eliki. That's through an intensification, an overpowering that they do b'derech mesiras nefesh. If the neshama of Atzilus did not come into this challenging situation, they wouldn't be challenged to have to dig deeper and bring out stronger energy. Because a neshama in Gan Eden, for example, and above, doesn't have these challenges, so it learns Torah, and it has love and reverence for God, and that's that. But here, even if you're not bound, but there is a resistance. I think of the Rebbe, or a Rebbe. The Rebbe is among a tzaddik, a neshama of Atzilus. Comes into this world, but he has to engage with the people. And he has to deal with their procrastination, and with their laziness, and with their challenges, and so on. So that's also a challenge for him. So this forces this neshama to dig deeper and reach his gabrus yiseda through mesiras nefesh and eze inyan eliki. He doesn't get into the details. Some divine matter that they have to completely push. This comes from the intensity of a more potent or concealed state, power, and faculty of the soul that would never have been drawn forth where there's no challenge, where there's no resistance. And then when that's neshama of Atzilus does that, then the oil that their neshama has radiates these galish mamish in full glory and full glow, even though they were engaged with a concealing body and physical and crassness of the material world. So he's only what he's qualifying here in this parentheses is basically saying that without the parentheses, you think, okay, neshama is just oil. They come into this world and they radiate and they shine light. He says, no, yes, there's also a scenario with these tzaddikim, with these neshamas come and have to engage with the world. Like Moshe Rabbeinu had to engage with Pareh. He was not nitfas by him. He wasn't bound by him. He wasn't controlled by him and therefore not impacted. But he had to engage with him. He had to fight with him. He had to argue with him to the point that it affected him. But then you need the Koyach Mesiras Nefesh to dig deeper and bring that out. It was always understood by Chassidim that when the Rebbe would continuously and relentlessly add new miftzayim, new campaigns, new projects, new initiatives. So of course, as a Rebbe, the Rebbe is a Mainam is Gaber, he's an overflowing spring of water. So he's constantly coming up with new ideas and wants to bring Mashiach. So we do everything possible to conquer the world with godliness and transform it into a dira b'tachtenim. But there was more than that. The Rebbe also had to inspire people who were not necessarily inspired on their own. So there's no question in my mind that the Rebbe coming up with new initiatives was also not just because in general the concept, but because there's a resistance in this world, there's an apathy. And as I always explain, the Rebbe went to war against apathy. Now he didn't have the apathy. The neshama of a Rebbe doesn't have apathy, but he's engaging with apathy. He lives in a world, he's the leader of a generation that has apathy and has other issues. So what does that neshama do? It comes up with new ideas, it digs deeper, what he says like a Mesiras Nefesh and Inyan Eliki in order to overcome and ultimately break through this resistance. But the resistance itself, the concealment itself has drawn forth this powerful oil. So he's explaining how the neshama of Atzilus also has avodah. It's a different type of avodah. The neshamas of Biy'a, as we're going to get back to in a moment, is from the bottom up. They are bound. So they have to fight with their animal soul and their own concealments, and they have to work it through and transform it to become kelim telekus. The neshamas of Atzilus are already keli telekus, but they now have to engage with the world from the top down, but they have to engage. And that's what he's describing in this parenthesis. So it really helps understand the practical dynamics at work here. Okay, so that ends the parentheses. I'm going to continue, then I'll take some questions if you want. Now he goes back to the neshamas of Biy'a. Now he also qualifies. Just like the neshamas of Atzilus come down below, and even to the crassness of this world, of the material, let's not think that neshamas of Biy'a are all low souls. They also have within them high-level souls. However, Havedi b'derech mamata l'mayla dafka. There the Aveda is mamata l'mayla. Remember, neshamas Biy'a, Yitzir Asiyah. You're talking about very high levels. In Biy'a, you have the level of Yeshaya Hanavi. You have the levels of the Srafim. I mean, it's high-level souls come from Biy'a. They're not simple souls. But still, compared to Atzilus, their Aveda is mamata l'mayla dafka, specifically from the bottom up, not bringing the light into the dark, but from the dark to the light. Ubezehu, and now he's concluding the words of the Magid. This is the conclusion of this long parenthesis. Ubezehu, this is what entails when we said that in the beginning, in the beginning, darkness resides or dwells in the person. He says, this is what he means, the Magid. In the beginning, by neshamas of Biy'a, there's a darkness and a concealment. That's how they start their lives. That's how they start their day, starting with a state of concealment. In the parentheses, yes, this also brings to Gili, because as the Magid says, first comes the darkness, but then comes the revelation. That I will elevate you and I will draw you out from the poverty, from the impoverished state of Mitzrayim, or Ma'eni Mitzrayim, from the afflictions of Mitzrayim, El Eretz Teva Rechava, to Eretz Yisrael, to a land that is good and expansive. So he's taken them from a state of distress to a state of expansiveness. So we see Rechavish Ha'ibur Husibis Haleda Vagili Bisachvus. I think Ayin Mitzrayim could also be the affliction because Mitzrayim is compared to the birth to pregnancy, and Geulas Mitzrayim is compared to birth. So the pregnancy has the birth pains, and the birth pangs of birthing. So he says the Ibur of Mitzrayim, that's the cause for the birth and the revelation. That's an expansive. So it begins in a narrow place, like a child coming out from the canal and from the womb, but then it comes out into a state of revelation. So basically he's saying it's coming from a state of darkness, but it comes to Gili. Va'aveidahu. And what is the service of these souls? What is their work, their avodah? Lahasir ha'alomis, to remove the concealments. V'hainu, which means, and this means, lases kelim ela'er, to create containers to the divine energy, to the energy. And through that, there'll be light and revelation coming from the darkness. And commensurate and proportionate to the type of refinement that's going on, that's how that will trigger in direct proportion, commensurate to the form of zichuch, will be the oir that responds to that. In other words, the more you refine, the more there's oir. The less you refine, the less oir. But that's the formula. And that is what the Maggid is saying, Onon ve'esh mislakachas. And with that he concludes the parentheses that began on page 896. So, I'll stop now if anybody wants to ask anything, please. All clear?
Was this 2 years? How long have we been on this parentheses? How long? You remember?
More than 2 years, I think. More than 2 years. Probably 3 or 4 years even. I'm not sure.
Wow.
I'd have to go back and see.
Make a CM just for this.
Well, the CM is not yet. The CM you could make next page, because he's still going back. We still didn't finish the Torah of the Maggid, and the subject matter is still continuing. So this topic is not over yet. It's just the parentheses has ended now, and that explains this whole idea. But he's going to continue. We still have to talk more about this whole transformation.
I have a question.
Let's continue. Unless
I have a quick question. If it's okay, if it's not, you can skip it. This where it's talking about the Neshamas of Atzilus and their avoda down here when they're trapped in it, they're bound by a goof. Where it says Vasaras Hester who Ali Hatik Boris Yaserab Derech Seres Nefesh, that line. So I recognize that the avoda of Shem of Atzilus is etc. Nevertheless,
you're breaking up a little.
Very similar. Can't hear me?
go ahead. Yeah, I hear you.
Hello?
We hear you.
Okay, the language, I understand it's different than from Lamata Lamata. It's Lamata Lamata, but nevertheless, the language similar to the Inyan of, the avoda of someone coming mina meitzar from the B'tzira Kardanissa, the Tigboras Ha'atzmis, this intensification of Gvura that it takes to elevate from the darkness to release the soul that's bound or it's stuck in the darkness. It's similar language. So my question to you is, do you think there's any shaykhs, any relationship with that, in particular in the issue of Gvura that says Tigboras, which I know is an intensification, but the root is about Gvura. I guess I'm wondering if you read into this anything about the function of Gvura, of Neshama, of Atzilus, the utility of Gvura coming into this world. Do you understand the question?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't see it at all that way. To me, it's as extreme from one end to the next, the Neshamas of Atzilus and the Neshamas of Biy'a. I gave a very clear example between the Rebbe and the Chassidim. one is coming from a powerful place of godliness, but he's put into this world and has to engage, but he's not bound by this physical world. So that changes everything. He's not bound by it. The neshamas of Biy'a are bound by it. So right there you have, so therefore his avodah is mamayil lamata. He has to engage with this. So instead of talking theoretically, let's talk about a real life person. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe, people who have to engage with darkness. The way they engage is they dug deeper and found greater strengths to bring even more light and inspire and do what they have to do. Then there's the struggles that we have. The people that are neshamas of Biy'a are coming from the bottom up. They're dealing with real Yetzer Hara and Nefesh Habamis, reality. So let's not, the best way to understand this is to make it very practical and look at two different types of people. So both are dealing with darkness, but it's completely different ways of dealing with it. Like we spoke earlier, the tzaddik brings Shem Ma to Shem Ban. And the neshamas of Biy'a come from Shem Ban to Shem Ma. They both have Ur and Gili. They both have Ur and Cheshach. That's true, because they're both dealing with darkness. But the second level of transforming the darkness to light is coming from the light. And the third level of sweetening the Gvura is coming from within the Gvura itself. So are there similarities in the sense that both have to put strength in their work? Of course. The tzaddik or the neshama Atzilus has to overcome the obstacles that he's describing. And so does the Baal Tshuva have to overcome obstacles. But that's just semantics. Their obstacles are very different. One is coming from within and one is coming from without, which is essentially what he's been explaining the last, I guess, 15, 20 pages, the fundamental difference between the second level of sweetening and the third. And they're very, very, are there some things in common? Can they help each other? Do they complement each other? Obviously, we said that ultimately you want the yichur of ma'am ban of the tzaddik and the Baal Tshuva. So the tzaddik also has tshuva, but his tshuva is not on a sin. And a Baal tshuva is on a sin. That changes everything. That's the difference between life and death. That's the way I would.
100%. 100%. Thank you. No, that was wonderful. And he even explained it even better if it was possible. That was great.
Okay.
I'd just like to mention today's your you all know the Arizal and another big tzaddik.
450th yard site to be precise. And I actually posted a little message. I did a 10-minute little video last night about it. I don't know if you guys saw it.
Cool. No, I didn't see it.
Sent it out to everybody. Maybe we'll post it.
I don't think I didn't get it.
Really?
No, not in my personal and not in Ayin Beis.
I see that I sent it. I see it's in your inbox, but maybe it didn't go through. Why not?
Maybe it didn't go through. You saying email or you saying WhatsApp?
WhatsApp.
I do not have it from you.
See if you get it now.
I just got it.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
Except I just got an image. I just got an image. I didn't get any kind of link, just a kind of interesting artistic image. Now I got it. I'll post it to Ayin Beis.
That's interesting. Why no one else got it either, huh? That's strange.
But now it's out there.
Do you have any blocks on your WhatsApp? Okay.
Nope.
I don't think I got it either.
I just posted to Ayin Beis for what it's worth for everybody.
Do you get our stuff, Tzvi? Do you ever get WhatsApp from us?
I have some WhatsApp from you, but I don't know if I get it. I don't know, something I don't concentrate on. I got the last thing I got was this morning. I got, healing the rifts that divide us.
So that's it.
Oh, that's it. That's the Arizal. Oh, okay.
Don't you see it says healing the rifts, honoring the Arizal's 450th yard site?
Well, I didn't click on it. If I click on it, maybe it'll open up. But I just have
no. But do you see those words?
No. I just see healing the rifts. I didn't.
You don't see a link that says healing the rifts 450th yard site?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't get that. If I click on it, maybe I'll click on it. I'll see what it says.
No, even if you don't click on it.
No, I don't see it. Yeah, yeah. When I clicked on it, I heard today we honor the 450th so I didn't see it. No, that's the one Yitzchak sent around. I didn't even look. Let me just look.
Okay, so let's continue reading here. Any other questions?
I just opened it on YouTube. You could see it.
Yeah, now I see it when you sent me. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the next paragraph. So the next paragraph begins continuing the language of the Magid in his Torah, and the parentheses of the Rebbe Rashab's explanation. So he says like this: "V'zeu d'musa kisei, shehu yizborach mechusa." Remember, we spoke about that the vision of Yecheskel, when he looks at the cloud, the dark cloud, and he sees the flame. So he was seeing the Adam Elyon ala Kisei, that's Atzilus, as it manifests in Biy'a. But Kisei, he says, the Musa Kisei, the image or the likeness of the throne that he saw, is from the word Kisei, from the word Mechusa. Shehu Yizbarach Mechusa. So the words of the Magid are like this: the Mekedem Achashchus, Shede Ba'adam, Sheni Yochel Ispal B'Slavus. I just want to see the actual language of the Magid. I want to go back to page 896. Give me a minute. There we are. Yeah, Shebali Slavus. So now, remember, he said we begin the state of darkness. He says, so the Magid says, that's the meaning that it says, the Musa Kisei, the likeness of the throne, Shehu Yizbarach Mechusa, God is concealed there. Shezehu, explains the Rebbe Rashab, Shezehu b'yiridus ha'er be'elam ha'briya, Commotion is barely ill. This is due to the descent of the energy, the divine energy from Atzilus into the world of Biy'a, which is the Elam HaKisei, the world of the throne, like it was explained earlier. And similarly, the same is true, the general descent of the Elam Biy'a Klolim back to macrocosm. Remember I explained microcosm, Biy'a in microcosm is the world beneath Atzilus. Biy'a HaKlolim, Biy'a Asiya in macrocosm is the world of Ak, Akudim Nekudim, and Atzilus Biy'a Asiya in microcosm. So this is also referring to Atzilus the Klolos going into Biy'a the Klolos and Biy'a the Klolos after the Tzimtzum. The Oz, who, when that descent happens, so he goes back now to the language of the Magid, the Oz who, then it's Kamoy Mara Adam. It's not the likeness of man. It's not the actual Adam Elyon. It's just like the likeness, like the Tselem, because it's only a reflection of, because it's gone down into this lower world. Sham Shoch, so the Rebbe Rashab explains, Sham Shoch Sa'ir, why they are lost man, because now, in order to draw the Eir, you need to have a lost man, the work from below, Maya Nukvin, that comes from below, Bezichu Chakelim, in the refinement of the containers. And like he said, and based on the refinement, that's how much you draw down, because you're now dealing with a state of concealment. It's true. It's still the likeness of the man, and it's the level of kisei, but kisei is mechusa. So now you need Aveda to reveal it, like we just learned. And the Magid continues, again, this is the language of the Magid. And that's the commensurate. As in direct proportion, commensurate to Moshe Neseret Boy, the way it's awakened in him, in the person, from the bottom up, his he generates energy. Kach neseret leiz barach. So too, he causes it. Cause and effect. He causes that from above will also be that the Eibishter gets neseret and awakened and stimulated. Im neseret b'tzadik ava. Even the tzaddik is awakened a sense of ava and love. Neseret l'mayla ava. That in turn awakens love from above. V'chein kol amidus. And the same with all the emotions. So when we have yira, we have reverence. So there's also we mamshel gvura from above. When we have teferes and we with the bikar the malka we enjoy and the beauty of God from below, that in turn draws down the teferes from above. So basically, the Maggid is saying, and the Rebbe Rashab is explaining, because we're dealing with now not the shamas of Atzilus that draw the energy into the darkness, but here we're talking about it's a state of concealment, mechusa, dmusa kisei. So here the work is through our work and a commensurate to what we do. That's the response from above, in the words of the Maggid. So he's combining here the Maggid and the explanation that he's bringing into this whole picture here. Just one moment. I want to just see something in the Maggid here. Let me see something. Yeah. If you look at the bottom of page 842 in volume 2, if you have that, there he discusses at length what the Musa Kisei is. The whole Simpson process. Yeah, the Esespheres of Atzilus is Mara Adam, and then there's the Musa Kisei. Yeah, the whole discussion of the Parsois, right. Oh.
He says on 896 who calls the who al Musa Kisa Dav Kishalia
I can't hear you. You're breaking up. You're breaking up. Okay.
Okay, later. I'm sorry.
Good. So I'm just seeing here. I just wanted to see the connect. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. The Rebbe Rashab is now going to explain further, next section, what does it mean that our work below is mirrored by above? He's going to talk about it in the context of Hashem Tzilcha, that essentially what we do is what initiates from above Am Shochet, and he's going to explain that whole process, which we're talking about, which is really Havayu Elikim. Through our refining the concealments that come through Elikim, we draw down Havaya, but it's now not just drawing down, it's L'fi Eifan HaZichuch, which means directly in proportion to our work. In other words, you whatever effort you make, cause and effect, that in turn generates something from above. That's the punchline of what he's saying right now. But it's all, again, the Shama's Biy'a after the Pas and after the Tzimtzum. So I'm going to stop here before the parentheses in the early section of the new paragraph on page 1348. Does anybody want to ask anything? Okay, so